Morning, everybody, and welcome to our Drop the Leash Thursday morning Facebook Live. I'm here, as usual, with Celeste, and today we are going to be talking about behavior chains. What is a behavior chain, and why does every pet owner really need to know about them? Not just know about them, but understand them, because they are super important, but they're not very well, most people don't know about them and are not aware of them. But Celeste and I are aware of them, and we live in fear of behavior chains, don't we?
Well, it's a love-hate relationship, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
it can, if you're doing it on purpose, it's great.
yes, yes, and we will talk about that.
Yeah.
But most we do second guess ourselves constantly on whether we've just created a behavior chain.
Yes.
And so, what is a behavior chain? A behavior chain, from a scientific, if I'm scientifically speaking, is a series of simple behaviors that are always performed one after the other in a particular order. And at the end, if you're talking about dogs doing behavior chains, there is always a reinforcer at the end of that series of behaviors for the dog. So they always get reinforced at the end. Behavior chains, as Celeste said, can be really good. Definitely, let me come up with some examples. Celeste, I'm coming up with one. I've got one. Maybe you can try and think of something else. The most obvious example of a behavior chain would be a retrieve. Because there are many components to a retrieve. Not a retrieve where your dog just chases the ball and brings it back. A retrieve where you ask your dog to go and pick something up off the floor for you and bring it back to you. So they have to go to the object, they have to pick it up in their mouth, they have to bring it back to the owner, and they have to put it in their hand. And I had to actually teach my dogs a retrieve for one of my assignments in the academy. And you teach every one of those components separately, and then you put them all together in a predictive chain. I have a question for you, Celeste. You and I engage in a giant behavior chain every week.
You and I do, or our dogs do?
Well, our dogs, well, all of us together
Okay.
engage in a giant behavior chain every week. What would that be? It's so obvious that you're looking for something hard here.
I am. Because, well, I'm thinking that we have so many habits and things that we do, but you and I together.
No, not together. Well,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
we're actually together. You are more engaged in it than I am. But there's a hint. It's every week. Okay. What do
We
you
see
do
each
on
other every day almost.
what do
I
you
don't
do
know.
on what do you do on Wednesday nights?
Oh, with agility. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
I
true.
told you were overthinking this. You
Yeah,
were
I was
looking for a
overthinking it.
bad behavior chain. This can be a good one. So
Yes.
agility is a perfect example of
Yeah.
a behavior chain because we reinforce the dog, and when the dog's first learning, we reinforce them after one obstacle, and then we add more obstacles and more obstacles. So eventually, your dogs are doing a 21 obstacle behavior chain if they
Yes.
reinforce, and then we usually reinforce them at the end of that.
Yeah.
So it can be it is a very good example of a behavior chain. So yeah, and we'll talk a bit more about agility and behavior chains in a bit. But definitely every obstacle in agility predicts the next one. You go over the
Yes.
jump, you're looking for your next obstacle. So it is very predictive. And dogs love behavior chains. Maybe that's why our dogs like agility so much, other than they get to run. And the reason they like behavior chains so much is because behavior chains are predictive patterns, and dogs love predictive patterns.
Hmm.
And that's the other thing that I've been talking about lately since I took Kim Brophy's course. I've been talking a lot about that to people because it's the other thing we don't think about is that dogs get into predictive patterns really easily. And just a little bit of geeky science here. The reason they love predictive patterns is because dogs are a product of the natural world. And so the natural world is all about predictive, reliable patterns.
Hmm.
And that is what they are a product of. And they've certainly lived in the natural world a lot longer than they've lived in our modern world, which is just chaos to them. So if they can grab a predictive pattern in the chaos of what we, present to them, of course, behavior change will be something that they really love. Oh my God, thank God I have a behavior chain. So predictable patterns and behavior chains help dogs feel safe. Novelty can always, and change is always scary for dogs. So, but if something happens over and over many times with good outcomes, chances are your dog's going to want to engage in that again. Okay, I get it. I don't have to worry about anything. I can just keep doing this. A great example of that are the games that we play with our students in the games program. We play a lot of games from Control Unleashed, and they're all about counting patterns, and dogs love those. The other thing is that dogs don't have to expend a lot of energy to process those patterns. If it's a novel situation, if there's no pattern, they have to take the time to process what they're supposed to be doing. They have to use more mental and physical energy. And again, dogs were created to spend as little time as possible doing those mental processes, and so they could spend more time trying to eat and survive. So they do like situations where they don't have to sort of go with that executive function. Oh my God, I got to think this through. Oh no, I know what to do. This is a totally predictive. I did it last time. Much easier. So it's the difference between this is easy, I know exactly what to do in this situation, or oh crap, this has never happened before. What do I do? Is this safe? How's it going to work out? So it's a big difference for our dogs. So that's why dogs are always looking for behavior chains and predictable patterns. And they will always choose the predictable pattern. Interesting thought about agility, because agility does work in that way, but we can also, it also doesn't work sometimes in agility if we change the course. And we know in some classes, because we have this quirky little thing we do here in some of the classes, if everybody's run the course and they've done a good job and we're looking for a challenge, we tend to run it in the other direction.
Yes.
And how many herding dogs have I seen that look at their owners and go, this is not the end of the tunnel we're supposed to be going into.
Yeah.
I am sorry, can't do that. Got to go in the other end. Oh, here they go. Because this is part of the behavior chain. So we're just going to ignore all that till it settles down. So it can work and it can't work. It can stress them out if you change the chains. It can be hard to get them out of the behavior chains. But if you know how to create and work with them, you can get some great outcomes. The problem is that most pet owners are completely unaware of what they're doing, and they end up creating behavior chains full of behaviors that they actually wanted to get rid of. So what they think is teaching an alternative behavior is actually creating a behavior chain. So let's give some examples here. So in jumping's the simplest one. So the dog comes and they jump up, you're walking your dog and you meet somebody and your dog jumps up on them. You say to your dog off, which is way too late because the dog is already, self-reinforced, but just a little side there. So you say off, the dog gets off, you tell the dog sit, then so the person can pat them. So the behavior chain is jump up, get off, sit, person pets me, owner probably reinforces me for sitting while the person pets me. There's your behavior chain.
Yeah.
What people don't realize is that when you do that, all in that sequence, you are dragging the jumping up behavior right along with you. So the dog thinks they're not only getting reinforced for sitting, they're getting reinforced for jumping, get off, sit, get petted, get reinforced.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. You're not eliminating the original behavior. It's just at the beginning of the chain. And so everything predicts along the chain. So there's all sorts of them. There's pulling on leash. we talk about this all the time in class. The dog goes to the end of the leash, the owner stops, or they back up, or they pull them back, or they call them. Dog comes back, we reinforce that. And then that becomes the whole chain. Go to the end of the leash, pull. You can even bark a little bit, turn around, come back to my owner, and get a reinforcer. So another behavior chain. Counter surfing is also a behavior chain. Actually, I think at one point you and I had a conversation about how almost everything in life seems to be a behavior chain some days.
Yeah, you have to always be like switching things up and be on your toes, and
Yeah.
because I think like even
Paranoid.
people have behavior chains. Like it's
Yes.
you know
Yes. Yes, we do. Yes, we absolutely do. Although we don't want to think about it. We're not much of a I can't think of one offhand for a human, but I know there are many of them. So one of the barking is one of the hardest behavior chains too, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Well, let's talk about it right now. So the dog is barking, the owner decides to ignore the dog until they stop. Most owners can't ignore the dog anyway, so at some point we break down. Been there, done that, and either do or say something to the dog. So the dog's gotten our attention, totally reinforced for our attention. We don't even need to feed them for not barking, but sometimes we do. And the dog is reinforced for persistently barking until the chain starts to roll out, and there you go. And we see it all the time in the agility field, and I'm just as guilty as everybody else. We're feeding our dogs, we stop to talk, the dogs bark, and we all just turn back and hand them another cookie without having a thought in our head.
yeah.
So, if anybody is watching now, I'm sure that, or if anybody's ever watching this, I'm sure they're probably thinking, "Oh my God, I've broken my dog. I've broken my dog in patience. Oh my God, is there any hope? What do I do now?" Can you fix it? Yeah. Because we can usually change behaviors that we have inadvertently created, but it's going to take time and effort. And what it really is going to take is a lot of careful thought about what you're asking, for sure. So, how do you fix it? Well, you have to be totally aware that you're not bringing along what Kim Brophy calls the first step of the dance with you. So we don't want to just shift to the next behavior because step one is always coming along with us. So here's an example that both you and I live through on a daily basis because we both have herding dogs, and herding dogs are bred to respond immediately, faster than the speed of light, at anything that happens in their environment. And far ahead of us on this one, they are. And usually their response is barking.
Yeah.
And they need to restore order to the environment, and so they bark in an attempt to do that. So you and I both have talked endlessly about this. I think my house is more extreme than yours. Both of us have dogs that bark if anything comes to the door.
Yeah.
They bark if they hear noises outside. Mine bark if Brett just walks from the kitchen to the living room and we happen to be sitting in the living room.
Mm.
Do you have any others in your house?
Well, because I'm so close to the street, it's people walking by. We have a back lane where the cars go. I mean, there's just a lot of activity. Anything that's outside of the house that's not routine and timed properly. It's like,
Yes.
it has to fit their schedule kind of thing.
Yes. Yes. And so we have tried different methods. I have tried different methods. Sometimes, and I've tried them all. Sometimes people think, okay, so between the really annoying behavior and the alternative behavior that I want, could I put in some other behaviors? So originally, And you know what? I think both you and I are well aware of the fact that we are using behavior chains in this situation, but we didn't know what else to do. However,
Yes.
I may have a possible solution,
Now
which
we're trying to, yeah, now we're figuring out other reasons,
I will
other things.
reveal at the end because I did get more information from Kim Brophy this week. So even though we knew we were creating a behavior chain, we just want them to, excuse me, shut the you know what up. What I
I
do,
think a lot of people can relate to that one.
yes, yes, and I prefer not to yell that phrase out 25 times a day at my dogs. So what I did originally was I taught them a cue. That's enough. And whenever they heard it, I would throw food on the floor and yell, "That's enough!" And they come running and they get the food. Easy, easy. Because I got 3 of them. I'm not getting anything, and you've got 2. We can't get too complicated here.
No.
So if my dogs ran to the door barking at something, I'd yell, "That's enough!" and they'd all come running back. So yeah, that's okay because I know I've created a behavior chain, but my only goal is I know I can't eliminate the barking that way, but I know that I can shut it down quicker.
Yes.
That was my goal for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you did the same thing.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
a few barks is fine, but that's it. You want it to end.
Yeah, and you know what? If people are okay with that and they realize it's a behavior chain, then that's perfectly fine. Sometimes you just want to shut something down and you don't want to go through a whole convoluted process.
Yeah.
So totally fine, totally fine. Just you need to always think that I can shut the behavior down, but I'm never going to stop it from happening. So does that work for people whose dogs jump on everybody? Not really.
No.
No, no, no. Because we can get ahead of that behavior. And I'm trying to figure out where I am. Sorry, I'm getting lost here. It's been a busy morning. Yeah, so you could try to put other behaviors in between, but no, you're just adding more behaviors to the chain. So in the case of what we do, we just mark the dogs in some way and they come back immediately. So we got a short 2 chain.
Just to jump in, because you said you're just adding more behaviors into the chain. For people who aren't aware of behavior chains, how long can they actually be?
Behavior chains?
Yeah.
Well,
they can be quite long.
agility is 21 obstacles.
Yeah. So for people to think, it's going to be, they do something, you do something else, and then it ends. It's not a 3-step thing sometimes. Sometimes it can be the 23-step thing.
Actually, that's brilliant, Celeste. They can totally outlast you.
They
You could
can.
throw in how many chains?
Exactly.
At the end of it, they're still going to know they got reinforced for everything in that chain.
Exactly.
Because dogs predict what happens next. And if at the end of it, there's a reinforcer, everything in your chain got reinforced.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they can outlast us on that.
I think they can.
Yeah. So in our case with this barking thing, what you and I did was we just offered a second behavior before we reinforced.
Right.
Shut it down. That's the best we can do. You could try to leave time in between your first behavior and your second behavior. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. And I actually heard Kim Brophy, like we had a whole conversation about this this week on her lives. She has done that in some instances in hopes that, so the second thing I tried was teaching my dogs to go to mats. And so, excuse me. So they would run to the door. I would say, "Oh, go to your mats." And they would all come back and they're mat dogs. So they would just get on their mats. So I would kind of hang out for a while. And maybe I would go to the door and look out and just to see if there was actually anything that they were. Because some of the times a lot of the time it's just they're barking in Annie's imagination. So I would go to the door, look out, and I'd come back and say to them, guys, there wasn't anything out there, but look at your line on your mats, you're being calm. So here I'm going to reinforce you for that. I don't know if that works. Although, as I said, Kim Brophy said she tries it occasionally at the beginning just to get her foot in the door on creating some sort of change.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it works because I don't know what's going on in my dog's heads.
Right.
I don't know if you ever tried that, leaving time.
I do leave time for the same thing. I kind of feel like maybe if there's that gap and I'm talking to them about something else for a little while, and then maybe it'll,
Yeah, I know.
I don't know. I mean,
I don't
they will
oh,
still go and bark. So I don't know if they, again, it's where they're outlasting us or,
I know. And now that I'm thinking about this, that if you're talking to yours and I'm going to the door and looking out and saying to mine, "Oh, there's nothing there," we're
yeah,
both rewarding them with attention from us.
that's true, actually. Ah, you can't
No,
win.
losers. We're such
We
losers.
can't win.
No, we failed again. At least we did this live and we
But
realized it.
but you know what, Laura? They're not barking while we're talking to them and looking out the door. So we win a little bit.
Yeah, maybe, maybe. Let's come
Do you
up with
know,
a better example for everybody out there who's desperate at this point.
it's funny. It's funny because now I'm thinking that the dogs are actually training us.
Absolutely.
You know, we're gonna bark so our people have conversations with us, and
Yeah,
then we'll get cookies.
maybe, maybe. There's definitely a chain there. Oh my
Yeah.
god. Okay, so what is the answer here? The answer is okay, we think the answer is, and like I said, I was talking to, Kim Brophy this week. She thinks, and she's agreeing with me on this. So don't trust me, trust her, because she's way more knowledgeable than I am. The best way to do it, and we know this anyway from all training, is to get ahead of
Yeah.
the behavior. All
Yeah.
right. Catch the dog doing what you want them to do and heavily reinforce that. And you have to do that outside of those real life situations where the behavior is so strong.
Mhm.
And just think about it. If you have a puppy and you catch every good behavior they offer you in life, you might get ahead of this. You
Yeah.
might also drive yourself nuts running around all day trying to catch everything good so you avoid a behavior chain. But hey, but if you try and catch the good stuff out of the situation, you set up the pattern of response to you. Um, so you can set up the situation to control the level and the intensity of the trigger, and work on catching a good response. So I better give an example because that seems very convoluted. Let's go back to jumping up on people. So if you got your dog on a leash and they're walking towards a person and they're going to jump up on them, you stay further away. You reinforce the easiest thing on the planet is just to reinforce the dog as they're walking towards the person on the ground. So you drop cookies on the ground, the dog goes, "Oh my God, all the value is on the ground where I have 4 feet planted. I'm not going to jump up on this person. I'm just going to eat my cookies and stay down." But if you get too close, you're going to lose that.
Yeah.
The puppy's going to get too close and they're going to blow it. But if you play it conservatively and you build that pattern of response, you're going to get that every time. And eventually, as it becomes a more predictable behavior for the dog, you're going to be able to get closer and closer to the person. So that is the way in which you can change these chains. Is you start at a low intensity or a situation where the dog is not going to respond to the trigger, and you work on it gradually. You stay at
Oh, it's the newspaper got delivered.
Yeah. And as we all watch as Celeste performs a perfect behavior chain.
I know, it's true. No, I haven't given them anything. They're just laying down now waiting.
Oh, so impressive.
Yeah.
That is. So you're going for time on this one.
I'm going to go for time on this one. And I'm not going to talk to her. I'm going to talk to you instead.
This is great. We can watch it in action.
Yeah. You should see the drool coming from their mouth right now because they're waiting for the end of the chain.
Wait. Yeah. Which is, so maybe you have to wait until she stops drooling.
Maybe.
She's given up on the food and moved on in her head.
That'll be my signal.
Then you could call it a separate thing.
Maybe.
So if she's drooling, she knows the food's coming. Isn't that interesting? All right. This could be one of the weirder lives we've ever done.
It's true. A demo that I might fail at, or I might not. Who knows?
Yeah. So this is it. Live training in the moment, real world, putting yourself out there as a trainer. We'll see. We'll see. But we're not going to fault anything that happens,
Yes.
because it's a situation you can't help. And there was a perfect example of you just needed to shut it down.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're aware that we have a potential chain going here or
Oh,
not.
absolutely.
Trying an alternative method to see what happens. But anyway, going back to getting ahead of it, you have to build up a lot of history with success getting ahead of it at low levels of intensity so that you can reinforce the dog. The dog's going to get lots of reinforcement. That alternative behavior will get stronger, but it's not attached to any behavior chain. It's a standalone behavior. Well, no, it's actually a chain. I walk towards the person. I keep my feet on the ground. Celeste throws food on the ground. I think all training is a chain. It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have to decide what is like a
What you
good
want.
one and what's a bad one. Like
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
useful to you and what's not.
Yeah. And the toughest thing is getting ahead of it because some of these behaviors are so instinctive and responsive that you can't get that lower intensity, i.e. our herding dogs in the house hearing anything.
Yeah.
They just go from 0 to 1,000,000 before I can even blink. They can
Yeah.
my dogs can be dead asleep, and the split second they're all standing in the middle of the living room floor barking at something,
Yeah.
you know. So it's like, oh my God, there's a predator arriving. I got to do something about it. That is what we bred into them, and that's where behavior chains and selective behaviors sort of come up against each other, because I want to break that chain, but I am working against what we selected herding dogs for, which is to be hyper vigilant and incredibly responsive to any change in the environment. You need to restore order or you're going to lose your sheep or a predator's going to come and eat them.
Right.
So we're battling something that is really, really, really strong in our dogs.
Yeah.
So
So a
anybody,
question would also be, is it fair to battle that?
yeah, yeah. Well, that was my question on Brophy's Live this week,
Yeah.
and she gave me a good answer, which I'm going to pass on to you guys. Um, so, and what I like about anything to do with Kim Brophy and her course is that we're not ever going to definitively say, yes, this will work for every dog in the world and it's guaranteed to work, piece of cake. So what she said to me was, here's how she deals with it. It works with her dogs. And it seems to be working with her dogs, and it'd probably be a good idea to try and do it with my dogs. So she did talk about leaving time between the first and second actions in the chain. And she said sometimes you can do that just to get your foot in the door, to set the dog up so they understand sort of what you're trying to get from them, you know. So she said, she's tried it with dogs a couple of times. The dog is barking. She's got steak. Hi, I'm the steak lady. Let's apply yourself to having some steak instead. Let's come away from the door. Look at me. I'll give you steak. But she said she wants to eliminate that quickly. So then she would try to add time. So the dog would bark, and then they would come back and look at her, and they would go, she's not paying any attention to me. She'd wait 30 seconds to a minute and then go, oh yeah, I'm the steak lady. Here's some steak. Didn't really get a definitive answer as to whether that is where she would kind of finish that.
Mm-hmm.
So her suggestion to me is that what I need to do is, she calls it the naming game. And so what I should do is, when Brett is moving around the house throughout the day, anytime he walks into the room, I should say, hey, that's just Brett coming in, and reinforce them, because of course they're being quiet.
Yeah.
They might look, but they're being quiet. They're not as totally nuts when he walks into rooms most of the time. So I catch that look. I go, hey, that's just Brett coming in, and I feed it. So I build up the response to me just calmly naming that. And then I try to apply that to when he's maybe coming in the door. And occasionally, Occasionally, I know he's coming in. Sometimes I'll say to him, "Can you text me just as you're about to come up the steps?" So I can have that split second when I am actually more aware than they are, and I can get ahead of that with, "Hey, just Brett coming in." And that has actually worked a few times.
Hmm.
And so a few times. So what do we do with all the other times when they just blow me off and go Cujo? That what she does at that point is she just gets in front of them, get between them and the door, look at them and say, "You silly dogs, you didn't need to bark at that." And you just calmly take them back to where they need to go. And so I've done a version of that where, because I can't get to the door right now because I'm on crutches, where they start to take off for the door, and I just say, "Hey, you don't need to bark at that. So come on back and lie down with me." And they come back and they lie down with me, and then I say, "Good dogs," but I don't offer them reinforcement for that. And it seems to be working.
Yeah.
Seems to be working so far.
So
Um,
then in a perfect world, if something like that happened and they just stayed with you and didn't get up at all, that you would reinforce.
um, Interestingly enough, yeah.
I'm just wondering, like,
I just tend to ignore them because usually what they're barking at doesn't matter to them at that point. If
no, but I mean, if normally what they would get up to bark at,
oh,
if
oh,
they heard it and they just chose to stay with you instead.
oh, I would probably fall off the couch. I'd be so Jesus.
But eventually that's what you would hope would happen.
Yeah, that would be my ultimate fantasy in life.
Yeah.
Yeah. But even if I can just get in, oh, it's just Brett coming in
Mhm.
before that,
Yeah.
and get the response, I'm happy with that. But
Mhm.
I actually, what you just described, I think you'd have to have a lot of reinforcement history and success
Yeah.
before they do that. It's like the look at that game where
Well,
we,
that's what I'm thinking. Like,
yeah, where we mark if our dogs are out in the world and they look at something and we
yeah,
say yes, they look back at us. Now, a lot of the time they see something, they automatically look back at us. So
exactly.
you're talking about the same thing. Yeah, it's possible, but I'm just as happy if I can get, "Hey, that's just Brett."
Yeah.
Um, Sort of that distinguish. And I actually think that with Rosie and Maddie, I can achieve that because I've already seen it with Rosie. Um,
Mhm.
Annie's a tough one. She's a tough.
Yeah, but any season hears things that you don't, so it's hard to get ahead of that one.
And yeah, and she stresses. She's the one that's stressed about restoring order to the situation. But
Yeah.
Kimber brought up a really good thought, which is with a dog like Annie, she doesn't really want to be in a situation where she has to bark at the door all the time and try and get everything back to normal. And I can see that it's stress barking with her.
Yeah.
So the fact that I can step in ahead possibly and either say, "Hey, just Brett coming through," or I can get out there and say, "You don't need to bark, come on back and lie down." It's also reinforcing because it's relief from being stressed. So there may be that reinforcement in that situation as well, which is perfectly fine.
Mhm.
Um, so, and if you build the history of reinforcement there, either they come back, they achieve it and I feed them, or they don't achieve it and they're still getting stress relief, I think may go towards less of a response
Yeah.
eventually. The interesting thing is that Rosie's like the queen of behavior chains. Like she's the world expert. What happens is she comes back and she's lying on the mat, right? And there's nothing going on. So she kind of looks at the door and she goes, "Rrr." It's to me like, I didn't really bark. I'm just going, "Rrr." But then I'm looking back at you quietly. Do you think I could get something for this?
Yeah.
You go, "No, no, no." You don't need
She's reminding you of what she
to.
did.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it is an interesting, it's creating, I guess, our own chain that we want to have
Yeah.
happen in a way. Where so the chain would be the dogs go to the door to bark, they come back to the mat and calm down. We just say, "Hey, that's fine, you don't need to bark. We're all just going to be calm." So, and you and I have both played the game in the field, just to dump over to another example, we've done that game out in the field where the dogs hit the end of the leashes when we're talking about dogs giving to leash pressure. So the dog hits the end of the leash and we need to show them what we want.
Mhm.
So we just wait. And if they turn back to us and the leash loosens, we mark and we reinforce
Yes.
a couple of times. But
Yes.
we don't want to keep doing that because we know that behavior chain.
Right.
So we always say to our clients, watch this time when the dog turns back to me, I'm going to say, yeah, good dog, good choice, but I'm not going to reinforce with a cookie.
Right.
And we always see happen. They stop going to the end of the lead.
They do. Yeah, they figure that one out pretty quick.
Wow. And I can't even begin to explain the process there. But this is a little bit similar to what we're trying to do in the house. So if you can set up situations where, for anybody who's trying to stop this, if you can set up situations where you can have things happen at a lower intensity where your dogs can actually respond the way you want them to, and practice that. So, I can do it with Brett walking through doors in the house. And sometimes they do go crazy when he walks into a room. But most of the time, he just appears in a room and I can say, yeah, that's okay. It's just Brett. Good dogs. Here, you're all quiet. Feed that.
Mm-hmm.
And to try and establish that pattern of response. The door is harder. Is there a way we could make the door less intense? Like I can, other than asking the people who are coming to your door to text you so that you're ready and you can possibly get ahead of the dogs.
Yeah.
To mark. And sometimes I can, as I said, I can do that. I don't know if you can ever make the door less intense because dogs are so triggered into it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. But
Yeah, I honestly don't know.
If they blow it, you just, hey, sorry, don't need to bark that much. And you don't yell at them because then they'll think you're barking too. Look, we're all barking. What a great, hey, we're all right here. Good. Nope. So I just say, you don't need to bark. Kim Brophy says, silly dogs, you don't need to bark. I just skip that part. And then we go back and we're calm. So we're still practicing, calm response. So I'm going to keep on working that system, see if it works. Nobody's come up with anything better. And Kim also talked about doing it out in the backyard as well. And the backyard is almost a little easier because you do the same thing. If your neighbor, is out in their backyard, you don't want your dog barking at the neighbors all the time.
Yes.
So you just go over, the dog's barking, go, oh, don't think you need to bark right now. But she names it. She goes, oh, it's just Bill, the neighbor.
Yeah.
You don't need to bark. So I'm just going to, first thought, she said, have your dog on a long line. All right. So when they do go to the bark at the neighbor, oops, sorry, you don't need to bark at, this is Bill. You don't need to bark at Bill. We're going to go in the house now. And so that is really, I know that's really effective because that's what I did with my dogs out there. I didn't name the thing they were barking at, but they'd go out and bark and I'd say, you don't need to bark. And we go in the house and they very, very rarely bark outside, my dogs, because we've done that for a long time.
So Penny was a big barker in the backyard, and she'll bark at sudden noises because she's Penny.
Yeah.
But she used to bark at the neighbors all the time when they would go to their yard.
Yeah.
And I actually would do that. I'd say, oh no, it's just,
yeah,
so-and-so. And
yeah.
But then I'd say, go play instead, because I wouldn't go in because I was busy doing something probably. And she would run and get her jolly ball and just start destroying it and playing, shaking her head with it. And now when she sees them, she just runs right to her jolly ball.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
And it's like she's taking out her frustration on the ball.
Yeah, I can't see mine doing that. Mine would be dead set on barking.
But she goes and checks to see who it is first. And if it's one of their family members coming out or somebody who's not always there, then she'll lose it.
Yeah.
But if it's those two specific people, then she goes back for her ball.
Yeah. And there's a lot of out there, people say, well, I want them to bark at strangers, but I don't want them to bark at the neighbors.
Right.
So, Brophy said she's dealt with that. If they're barking at a stranger, she said, oh yeah, good dog, you warned me, but that's enough, you can stop now.
Yeah.
I don't want to go down that road. For a lot of people, that's way too complicated.
Honestly, I've never done that, but she knows those two people.
Yeah.
Maybe because I named them, I never really gave that much thought, but
yeah.
but anybody else,
But if you keep, and we've taught this concept in our reactive dog class, because we have a lot of reactive dogs who are also reactive in the backyard.
Yes.
So we said to people, if they go out and bark, have them on the line so you can bring them back in, and just go out and say, oh, sorry, you're not supposed to be doing this. We're going to go back in now. But we also teach people to get ahead of it.
Yes.
As soon as your dog comes out, if they look over at the neighbors, you mark and reinforce that.
Yeah.
If they glance at the neighbor, you catch that. That's the important part. And you might have to catch it as soon as you step out your door, rather than letting them run to the fence, because usually it's the fence where the barking occurs.
Yeah. And to be honest, that's where I started with Penny.
Yeah. So I would catch it right outside the door. Oh, you're looking at the neighbor. Good. Here, yes. Have a cookie type thing. Just mark yes and reinforce that. That's where we play the look at that game. We talked about people playing the look at that game on their back decks, where the dogs had more chance of being quiet. Or even, I think with one, we even just opened the back door. It was still in the house, but it got to look out the back door.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you have to start. Start slow sometimes.
Yeah.
Because the fence line is just as bad as your front door, I think, for a lot of dogs.
Yeah.
So the yes game, though, is also, that in itself is a behavior chain. Really.
Yeah, the dog looks, we mark yes, the dog looks back, the dog looks a cookie. I can't think of anything we teach our dogs that isn't a behavior chain. Anything
that's what I'm saying. Sometimes it's a blessing.
Yeah. but anything you're asking your dog for, you ask them, they respond to you, you give them a reinforcer, it's always a behavior chain.
Yeah.
It's just, you need to think about whether it's a good one or a not so good one.
Yeah. If it's to your benefit.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think we'll be talking a lot more in our classes about behavior chains and making people more aware of them, because people just don't understand. They think, again, they're teaching a good alternative behavior, and they are in a way, but they don't understand why the original nuisance behavior is still there. So, that's the beginning of the chain, the first step of the dance.
Yeah. So, and to be fair,
even
if you do understand behavior chains, you're likely to still fall into that trap.
Totally.
At some point.
Like us.
Exactly. It happens.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I have no, I'm the last person to say I'm not going to screw up and
so we're not pointing fingers. Yeah.
Sorry?
We're not pointing fingers at anybody here. This is something that we all do.
Oh, yeah. Totally. Yeah. Totally. We can't stop because we're human. Totally get that. Right? Like, even, dogs barking, you look at them, there's your behavior chain. Oh, I just looked at you for barking. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Hard to do. Okay. So Celeste, are there any questions or comments, or we good?
No, but if people come up with behavior chains that they see at home, like, share them with us, because you're not going to be the only one with that behavior chain.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of fun to see.
Yeah, and if you're stuck with one, maybe we can help you out. So put something in the comments and let us know. And it's certainly you and I have always been aware of them, but I think I'm starting to think a lot more about a lot of things differently because of them in what we're doing, with our dogs and student dogs. So hopefully we've given people something to think about today, and they'll be able to make some changes if that life isn't working for them and their dog right now. All right. So thank you everybody for joining us today. We'll be back next week. Not sure what we're going to be talking about, but we'll try and come up with something useful and practical. And in the meantime, everybody have a good week, and go out and play with some behavior chains. Thanks, Celeste.